With the gaming industry's recent push for a digital-only future, the concept of lost media has gained more and more traction. Abandoned games, beta builds, even classic radio interviews, all of these can give us further insights into the creative minds that created our favorite media. It's one of the reasons why hardcore fans of a property inevitably find themselves seeking these oddities out. So, let's do just that. Today, we'll be doing a quick tour through some forgotten treasures from the Like a Dragon series, both to learn more about their history and to hopefully prevent currently available RGG media from being forgotten about down the line. The first subject of interest for today is Ryuga Gotoku Mobile for GREE. Released in 2011 and discontinued in 2013, this app was essentially a spiritual successor to what RGG Online would later be, that being a game focused on card-based combat with an added social aspect to it all. While the app itself has long been inaccessible, you can still explore pieces of its homepage via the Wayback Machine, giving you a glimpse into some of its different card designs, promotional art, and special events that occurred back in the day. Now, thankfully, these are far from being the only remaining assets of the project. See, one of the many reasons I've sought out Japanese versions of different RGG games is that the PS3 era of the series was rich with cross-promotional material. In the context of RGG Mobile in particular, Yakuza 5 and Kurohyou 2 included leaflets pertaining to some exclusive unlockable characters and items, which were thematically bound to these specific entries in the franchise. And if these inserts weren't enough, you can even find references to RGG Mobile while playing through Kurohyou 2's main story. As part of the critical path, Tatsuya will become acquainted with a fake Kiryu, and by the end of this quick detour, one of Kiryu's longtime fans will reward you with a code for RGG Mobile, in the form of an actual in-game valuable. I for one appreciate this fourth wall break very much. Now, by nature of GREE having shut down its game division years ago, there's sadly no way of showing the actual gameplay footage for RGG Mobile. And trust me, I've still tried looking for any loose APK files online. But for the time being, the artwork shown should give you a glimpse into what this early venture would eventually lead to, and how RGG could expand on it later on. To that end, we might as well segue into the next oddity of the video, one that is known as RGG Kizuna. This piece of media had a very similar premise to mobile, both in terms of its GREE nativity and the general approach to uniquely thematic assets. Yet, despite all of this, it is also the one RGG project with the least amount of info remaining on it. See, Kizuna was released in the middle of RGG Mobile's lifespan, and was discontinued a mere 6 months after its launch, likely the result of oversaturation and the fact that Kizuna was predominantly multiplayer focused in its structure. The only thing that genuinely made it stand out from its predecessor is that this project had a more deliberate art style present, comparable to the spooky graphics art in the Kurohyou cutscenes and some of the earliest card designs in RGG Online. Actually, now that I think about it, it might be that the combined experimentation between Kizuna and mobile was precisely what would later allow RGG Online to avoid the pitfalls that plagued these early card game ventures. The similarities between the projects in question should be pretty evident if you've ever tried RGG Online yourselves. But unlike its predecessors, this latest attempt at card-based combat has been going strong since 2018, still actively getting new characters, plot points, and unique rarities as we speak. While I may despise the various gacha elements surrounding it all, this steady evolution of apps nonetheless gave us some really cool artwork to appreciate, and some extra lore for our favorite characters, much of which has been meticulously archived by the RGG community of today. So even if Mobile and Kizuna are lost to time, at least the product of their evolution is still in safe hands. Now, to hopefully step away from overtly money-dependent projects for the time, let's look at the next piece of media. Please tell me that I'm not gonna have to cover pachinko for 5 minutes. You know what I hate? Pachinko. I've been a longtime fan of numerous Konami IPs, many of which were discarded in lieu of Pachi slot projects for years on end. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with disdain for the mere concept behind these atrocious machines. So then, why is it that the Yakuza Pachi slots have so much preserved content to them? We have detailed tutorials with unique artwork, gigantic lists of cute character gifs, gameplay footage with an astonishing negative 15p resolution, and it's not like there's only one Yakuza game that got a personalized pachinko analog. Some games would even get dedicated PC apps you could play. Being largely reminiscent of the actual Pachi slot minigames, you could find at Club Vulcan in various games. If it wasn't obvious, I wouldn't recommend trying any of these apps, even if they were still publicly available, as a decent portion of such products tends to just take well-known artwork from a game and imbue it with gambling shenanigans. However, every now and then, you'll come across a project that features brand new cinematics, minigames, and even OSTs that can retroactively find their way into actual console games. With that in mind, I'd like to point you all towards one of the two Kenzan-themed machines that we got in the past, the so-called Gion Amaterasu. The first I've heard of this oddity was during a lengthy conversation with Yakuza Archive channel, and the sheer absurdity behind the concept of the Amaterasu could genuinely make it a prime contender for a Kenzan Kiwami side story. Unlike the fairly down-to-earth narrative of the console game, this accompanying Pachi slot has Miyamoto Musashi face off against demons, interact with characters that are likely anime stand-ins for the celebrity face models, and partake in brand new minigames imbued with earth-shattering magical properties. I realize how absurd this sounds, even by the standards of, well, Ishin Kiwami for example, but if you remove the predatory gambling from it all, the Amaterasu has so much content that would be a perfect fit for the over-the-top nature of most Yakuza remakes. And the OST? Dear God, why did they have to go so hard on these songs? It's like the DMC The Last Judgment thing all over again. Without going too far with this bizarre tangent, I'll just say that the Amaterasu finally gives Kenzan the karaoke song we all hoped for, in the form of Akatsuki, a beautifully uplifting rock anthem reminiscent of the song Hands from Yakuza 6. Surprisingly, you can still listen to it as we speak, and I'd urge you to do so, because with YouTube's faulty copyright system, it's only a matter of time before this piece of media just disappears with no warning. And this song is way too cool to be abandoned. Back to the topic at hand, while my original research led me to believe that this Kenzan Pachinko has long been abandoned, particularly due to the scarcity of footage between its release and 2022, recently there's been a handful of Japanese content creators suddenly posting live streams focused on this project yet again. It might be another case of someone refurbishing one of the older models and putting it back into club circulation, but this thing was so obscure that I just had to include it in the video. Anyway, with that finally taken care of, let's move on to what is likely the most popular piece of abandoned Yakuza media: Streets of Kamurocho. Released in 2020, this free Steam game was made to both celebrate Sega's 60th anniversary and to offer a mashup between two beloved IPs, evidently Streets of Rage and Yakuza. This game followed the events of the very first Yakuza game, with each major section of the levels being capped off via a boss fight, featuring Lau Ka Long, Shindo, and naturally Nishikiyama. What's more is that on top of being able to play as either Kiryu or Majima, if you beat Streets of Kamurocho, you'll even get to play as Ichiban, with each of these three characters having personalized fight themes accompanying them. Now, on the surface, this game might just look like a cute nod for old-school Sega fans to enjoy, but it's actually a lot more special than that. While Sega arcade games have been a staple of Yakuza's side content for years, direct crossovers between these two have really picked up in speed after the release of Streets of Kamurocho. The most obvious example would be the addition of Crazy Delivery into Infinite Wealth. And speaking as someone who hadn't experienced classic Sega IPs before discovering Yakuza, it's these crossovers that made me want to seek out older gems like Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, and even Shenmue. With the amount of Sega revivals on the horizon, I think we'll see even more crossovers like this in the future, and I'd like to think that this little Steam game, and the positivity surrounding it, at least played a small part in these projects eventually being greenlit. Streets of Kamurocho was available for download for about 2 days, And yet fans praised it so much that the game was made available yet again 1 month after its original launch, before being delisted for good. As strange as it may sound, projects like this one give me hope for future RGG projects as well, cause even if some beloved media ends up lost to time, the lessons learned from them are still present today. And in the best case scenario, our vocal support of such media might lead to much of it being preserved for even a little while longer. So, to bring this video full circle, I'd like to go over some classic Yakuza console games that currently run the risk of being forgotten about down the line, in the hopes of maybe saving some of them for newer generations of fans to enjoy. When Ishin Kiwami launched in Japan, the original versions of Ishin were taking off digital storefronts, meaning that anyone who'd want to experience the game from this point on would have to find a physical copy. Lost Paradise only exists on the PS4, and chances of it receiving a PC port are next to none, thanks to the licensing issues, meaning this game might also be forgotten with time, despite its quality. Dead Souls, while still having a digital presence, is exclusive to the PlayStation 3, whose store was set to close in the near future, once again forcing people to depend on an overinflated secondary market or just default to emulation. The list of Yakuza games affected by this is significantly bigger than we give it credit for, with the likes of OG 1 and 2, Kenzan, the Kurohyou games, and even oddities like the original Yakuza 6 demo fading further and further into obscurity. With how massive the Yakuza community has become over the years, it feels like the right time to remind them of this franchise's origins. Whether you opt for reprints, re-releases, ports, or remakes, bringing these classics back in any capacity is a good thing to strive for. Just speaking from personal experience, the first Kurohyou game was the main reason why I started doing video essays on this channel and meeting many wonderful people in the process. Maybe one of these untranslated games has the capacity to do the very same thing for someone who hasn't even started their journey with the franchise yet. So if there's even the slightest chance of that being the case, then I hope that the praise our community gives to these forgotten gems eventually leads to them returning, or at the very least, influencing future Yakuza games for the better. With all of that said, thank you for joining me on today's journey through the archives. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new about this amazing series. If you want to learn even more about some obscure Yakuza media, I would kindly recommend checking out Devil Leon's channel, particularly the Iceberg video, as it's an amazing watch. And that's really all that I wanted to share today. So, until next time, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!